Hello, female satin bowerbird. How would you like to hear a story about aeroplanes? Story comes from Aeroplane magazine, which comes to me C-mail monthly via the newsagents. So this is the July 2021 issue. Story concerns Sir Charles Masefield, son of Sir Peter Masefield. Masefield the elder was a journalist working for C.G. Gray on The Aeroplane after having been a draftsman at Fairey Aviation. He came to notoriety during World War II when he expressed strong opinions in the Sunday Times to the effect that the Americans were doing the wrong thing with daylight bombing over Germany. He came to Churchill's attention. He finished up on the Beaverbrook Committee. The old boy was knighted in 1972, died in 2006. He became one of British aviation's most significant figures in roles such as Chief Executive of British European Airways, Chairman of the British Airports Authority. So with a pedigree like that, you'd have to think this fellow would have had to try pretty hard not to have a successful career in aviation. At the age of 13 in 1953, he went off to boarding school at Eastbourne College, where he joined the Combined Cadet Force in the RAF section, where he had a wing commander, Donald Perrins, in command, and he got to fly a glider called a Grasshopper. When he was 17, he applied for and got a RAF flying scholarship at Cambridge, 3 years in the University Air Squadron, flying de Havilland Chipmunks. And at about that point in time, when he finished his engineering degree, he met this David Treffgarne, Lord Treffgarne now, and actually Lord Treffgarne then. David had an ancient Oster, which he said he was going to fly to Australia. He asked, "Do you want to come too?" I told him, "Of course." But my father, who was running Beagle, said it was ridiculous. You can't fly all that way in a little single-engined aeroplane. I said, "Well, lots of people have." But he told me it so happened that they'd just sold a Beagle Airedale to a flying club in Adelaide. We'd be better off taking that than the dilapidated old Oster. They did take it. GASBI arriving at Parafield on the 17th of July 1963. Okay, so Daddy's got him a job delivering aeroplanes from Daddy's British government aeroplane factory. While they were in Australia, having delivered the Beagle, they bought themselves a de Havilland Dragonfly, flew it back to Britain after overhauling it at Camden, put it on the market in Britain and found that they sold it to a bloke in California, so they just had to deliver it. Following which, together the pair of them set up a little charter airline, which rose as high as to operate, leasing it, for a couple of weeks, a Bristol Britannia. After which, Charles went back to being delivery pilot and demonstration pilot for, let's call it Beagle aircraft. And this thing was basically a British attempt to compete with the American Cessna 310, be bigger, and it had a very cramped cockpit, and it wasn't actually particularly commercially successful. But for a while, it meant that young Charles Masefield could afford to buy a P51D Mustang on the civil register and have the only one on the civil register in England. He put it through the Beagle paint shop, so it looked pretty cool when he was air racing it. In 1967, painted up in the Congolese Air Force colours for a movie, he won the King's Cup air race. After painting it as an American 8th Air Force P51 for the movie of General Patton, he sold it to the movie makers. And when Beagle went belly up in 1969, when the British government put it into receivership, he was fairly perfectly placed to land a job as a test pilot for Hawker Siddeley. So he got to fly a lot of the British last big, heavy military jets. And he was also demonstration and delivery pilot for the HS-748 and the Hawker Siddeley Andover, which is a civilian version of this aeroplane I'm showing you at the moment. He also flew the Nimrod. Here he is representing BAE Systems in Kuala Lumpur at the Defence Services Asia 2000 exhibition. So anyway, here we have the funny story. HS-748, just imagine that in civilian colours. Here we have Charles Masefield. Story's headlined, "Anywhere You Can Go." One occasion when Charles inadvertently pushed the limits of aircraft performance was when he was in demonstrating an handover to the Indian Air Force with co-pilot Kevin Morehouse. Quote, "We were asked if we could take the handover into Walong. We always had one question. Which aircraft went up there now? The answer was a DC-3. All right, I've shown you what an handover looks like, albeit with the wrong paint job. So behold, here we see a venerable DC-3. Two engines, 1,000 horsepower to 1,250 horsepower. Conventional undercarriage, that means a little wheel at the back, which means it's pretty good for getting into short runways, getting out of short runways. Manoeuvrable, docile, easy handling, plenty of power. Has a good reputation as a bush cargo aircraft. The Australians and the Americans used a lot of them in New Guinea in the highlands during World War II. So yeah, they can handle rough country. Actually, the DC-3's major claim to fame, it was the first aircraft that could ever cover its own operating costs as a civilian airliner. It didn't need a mail contract or a government subsidy in order to pay for its own fuel and maintenance and the labour of keeping it in the air. We always had one question, which aircraft went up there now? The answer was a DC-3. Well, I told them, anywhere a DC-3 can go, we can go, with the 748 or the Andover. Quote, do you want to go there first in a helicopter? Take a look? I said no. Quote, we had an Indian Air Force test pilot with us and he sat in the right-hand seat and navigated us to Walong, which was up a very steep, narrow valley. I looked down and it was a grass runway, but it looked nice and long. I arrived, just about getting the aircraft on the ground in the first few yards. With full reverse thrust, we came to a pretty rapid halt. And then I realised that we were at the end of the runway, staring against a steep incline in front of us. The only way we could turn the aircraft round was a 3-point turn. Reverse pitch, forward pitch, reverse pitch. We taxied back to the start of the runway, did another 3-point turn, shut down, and everybody got out. I said, come on, Kevin, let's pace it out and see how long it is. When we paced it out, I thought, oh my God, we're never going to get airborne from this. Quote, after much thought, I reckoned that if we loaded the aircraft outside its rear centre of gravity limit by getting the people we had on board to sit up in the sloping ramp, get everybody sitting up the back. Quick little side note to those who don't know a whole lot about aeroplanes. There's a saying, aeroplanes which are nose heavy fly badly. Aeroplanes which are tail heavy fly once. The first kind, you can't get the nose up, it doesn't want to do it. The second time, sits on its arse, stalls and spins, and that's it. So this is a very risky proposition that he's putting forward to himself and his co-pilot. After much thought, I reckoned that if we loaded the aircraft outside its rear centre of gravity limit, by getting the people we had on board to sit up in the sloping ramp, we ought to be able to make the takeoff with, from the very start, the nose wheel up in the air. That would reduce the rolling drag by a third. We decided to do it, which was highly irresponsible. We charged off down the strip and managed to get into the air. Quote, back at Jorat that night, at the Indian Air Force mess, the commanding officer gave a little cocktail party for our team. Everyone was saying, he landed at Walong. He landed at Walong. He landed at Walong. I said, why are you so surprised? The DC-3 goes up there. Oh, yes, it does, twice a week. But it never lands. It does airdrops. Yes, the DC-3 goes there, but it never lands. It does airdrops. Dum-de-dum-dum-dum-dum. I don't know about you, but I reckon that's hucking hilarious. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. grandmother and granddaughter. And they like their aeroplane stories just fine. Bonus extra footage.